Oh, hi. Thanks for joining me. We've been talking a lot about negative things that have happened in our life recently. And I think it's very easy in the modern world to kind of get wrapped up in how hectic it is, especially if you live in a big city like London. Everything always seems like it's moving very fast, and everything in the world is all happening at once and it's happening now. It's easy, I think, for it to feel like time itself can be the enemy. I've realised during my breakdown that it's really not. I think time is something that we can forget about and neglect. And over the past year, I've probably learned one of the most important lessons in my personal development. It's okay to be a little bit selfish, I think. It's okay to take time and space for yourself, say no to other things, to say no to all the things in life that can make time feel like it's the enemy. While I was having my breakdown, I had become actively suicidal for the first time in years. That's something for another day, I think. I kind of stumbled into a new hobby that some friends of mine were going to try, and I thought I'd tag along. If you'd known me in real life, then you'd know that LARP quickly became my absolute favourite hobby. Not long after that experience, for many, many reasons. That's a whole lot of things we can talk about, and we'll do that another day. One of the key things that it allowed me was to be able to have a break from city life and kind of escape from all the things that made me feel like there was never enough time to kind of deal with things. I got out into nature, which is something that I'd almost forgotten how much I'd loved, because all I wanted was to go out to parks and to the country as a kid. And I never really got to do that so much until I picked that up. I was still dealing with severe social anxiety at the time, so I didn't quite have it in me to get involved in things that were happening as I feel I'm starting to do now. I enjoyed a lot of quiet time alone at the events. Even if I wasn't always active in what was happening, I was always happy that it allowed me time to really kind of reflect and think about my life and what was happening with me. This was all before I realised I was trans. I didn't really understand at the time that I was dealing with mental health issues. But being able to take that time away from everything allowed me the opportunity to gain some perspective and really analyze what was happening. And the first thing I noticed that when I was removed from the situation, I felt very much relieved and a lot better about myself and who I was as a human being. I realized I wasn't, as a person, as negative as I felt in the situation I was living every day. When I came back from LARP, I was incredibly refreshed. I was exhausted, but it was like I had come back rejuvenated, and everyone could see it. I got so many comments and a ton of positive feedback from colleagues, from friends. Everyone seemed to think I was just in a much better place. And every time I would go to LARP and come back, they would say the same thing. And I would feel the same thing. But after a week or so, as I adjusted back to reality and got back into city life, that kind of freedom and happiness seemed to almost melt away, as all the issues I'd mentioned in my previous vlogs sort of started to come back into prominence in my life. And they regained and retook their hold on me, and I regressed and reverted back that prior state of being, of always being anxious and increasingly depressed. Each break I'd have with this hobby would lead to a repetition of that same cycle. And I think eventually I felt as if I no longer cared about life outside of the hobby, which is clearly not a healthy way to be. The debts I had incurred on behalf of my father I chose to maintain those rather than reduce them. I decided, you know what, I would start to try and focus on myself and actually enjoying life for a change, instead of dealing with all the things that I felt I had to do, as opposed to the things I chose to do, which is also not a healthy way of being. So I was rejecting what was obviously unhealthy because I was aware that that was making me feel bad, regardless of how objectively necessary it was. Which you can look at it a few ways as to whether or not that's... It seemed like a positive thing, though I recognize it probably wasn't the best decision at the time. I lived to do what I enjoyed. I was a bit more neglectful and dismissive of almost everyone and anything that didn't really contribute to that new aspect of my life that helped me feel happy. And oddly enough, the less I seemed to care about the things that were causing me distress and problems, the more my work performance seemed to improve, which I think is a very strange concept, but it's something that we have to acknowledge. Maybe it's because I didn't care for consequence anymore, so I was being a bit freer and trying more things in work, in my position. But I think everyone could see that when I wasn't at LARP, I was pretty miserable. I mean, my mentor at work said that he could see it, and that every day I was sad, and that he knew it was just a matter of time before I was going to have a complete meltdown. He asked me a very simple and important question. And this is going to sound strange because it seems like a strange idea, but I don't ever remember ever being asked this before. And all he asked was, "What do you want to do?" And it was a question that surprised me. I did not have an answer right then and there, because the truth was, I hadn't thought about it. And as long as I can remember, I hadn't thought about it and had just been doing whatever needed to be done, taking care of whatever was in front of me, and just pushing forward in the only way I had been taught how. But I did recognize that the way I was living was wrong in a lot of ways. So I took the decision that I was going to change the way I was living. Obviously, I couldn't change everything all at once, because change, growth, personal development, that's a slow process. Especially when you're dealing with things like anxiety and depression. You do what you can as and when you can. So there was a catalyst for this change, which was my flatmate at the time, who I had come to just call the drama llama to people, because that's kind of what she was to me most of the time. As one can expect, there was another argument, and I lost my temper, and I asked her to leave, because I had had enough. She thought I meant right here and now, so she called her boyfriend from abroad, and it was a whole thing where she was afraid I meant like I was going to toss her out. But really, I just meant when she had a ticket, she had to go. When she could afford a ticket and go, she had to go. And she did leave about a month later. I had realized I needed a change in my career. I was not, while I was capable of doing the job, I did not enjoy it, and I didn't enjoy my workload, and I wanted to be in a completely different position. So I applied for a new one. I was advised of this position, and they thought I'd be good for it, and I got the job. I feel like I'm a good fit in the department, and I'm doing really well there. It was a massive relief. I can't even begin to talk about how strange and bizarre that change was, because I had time. I could think. I wasn't always under pressure every day. And there was pressure sometimes, but it was a different kind of pressure. It was not a situation that I'd gotten used to, where everything had to be here and now and right away. I mean, there were sometimes moments like that, but they were few and far between. I, again, reassess the debt. I started to manage it again. And, you know, I was reducing it while living a relatively modest life. And I actually spoke with him and got him to finally contribute after years of him neglecting it, to kind of actually take a little bit of action to cleaning up his own mess for a change. And I started to feel like I needed to actively seek engagement. I wanted to actively seek engagement with people that I didn't really get to see too often. And it was a very strange feeling as someone who's always been an anxious introvert. It was like two very simple concepts had a massive impact. Being able to have time and being able to actually say, yes, I have the ability to choose to say no to things and to say yes to things that aren't even put in front of me. Those things had been missing from my life up until these moments. And again, I got tons of feedback from people that knew me, that could see me, and seemed to recognize that I was feeling a lot happier. And it seemed like I had started to become a different person almost, without these things being constantly hammered into the back of my head every day. I mean, I felt like I had overcome a period of great strife in my life. They're easily not the biggest issues I've survived, and not the worst things I've survived. But they were the most constant issues I'd had to deal with in years. And they had been a source of a lot of negative reinforcement in myself and my self-worth. I felt like I'd actually grown up through this whole process. And finally, at the age of 28 years old, I had started to feel like I was a proper adult, and that the issues I'd experiencing were no longer issues. It was a strange relief, as I felt anxiety and depression seemed to diminish significantly, but they didn't go away completely. I instead kind of, that's when I said earlier that I had a sense that the way I was living was wrong. That continued to persist. Like, it was something that once everything else had spilled out, it didn't go away. It was odd, because objectively I knew that all the things that were causing me problems were no longer issues, practically. But it was like a bitter aftertaste that lingered. A strange, bizarre discomfort that I kind of realized I'd always felt. A dysphoria. And that's when I suppose I started to search for what the cause of that was. But I think finding and identifying that marks the end of a chapter and the end of a period of great development and the start of a brand new journey. And that's a journey I'm glad and happy to share with you all. So thank you very much for watching and taking time out of your day to come and listen to me ramble. I've been Mara Alexandra, unapologetically me. Do like, share and subscribe if you feel like it, if you want to see more things. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Bye!